Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. So it looks like PlayStation's next major exclusive leaked out a little bit early. The timing of this is quite unfortunate, and one that I think fans need to at least be aware of. That way they can kind of prepare themselves accordingly. So we'll talk about all that today and all the impacts that could ensue. Then also Sony said no to Xbox's strategy and how they release their games. Sony feels they have a better strategy up their sleeves, or at least for them, and we'll outline how that looks going forward. As always though, guys, if you're new to the channel, do like and subscribe. It is a great help, and that way you can also stay up to date with all of the daily gaming news. But with that said, we do have a lot to get into, so let's just go and jump right in, starting off with Alan Wake 2. This is legitimately one of my most anticipated games right now. Yeah, I'm a little bummed still that there's no physical version planned. That is very unfortunate, but I mean, nonetheless, this is a game that I am still super excited about. It's a sequel that I've been waiting for a very long time, for well over a decade, in fact. That's just crazy to me. But we got another important detail today because Remedy's communication director claimed Alan Wake 2's completion time will be about 20 hours long. Now that's actually a really good time here. The original game was about 10 hours long, so it does appear that the sequel will be about double the length of the first game. That really just kind of speaks to how much they're including in this game. And I mean, technically, you are playing as two different characters with their own stories. Now, they're connected, of course, but if you were concerned with dual characters and that Alan Wake himself might not get as much attention as he did in the first game, well, based on this information here, both will have plenty of time unless one is favored over the other. Now, we'll kind of see how all that turns out, but once again, Alan Wake 2 is shaping up very well. Now, also for you Nintendo fans out there, I know things have been a little quiet here recently, but I do come bearing good news today because the Lara Croft collection is now set to release for the Nintendo Switch later this month on June 29th. You can actually pre-order on the eShop for $25 as we speak. Really, that's not a bad price, as this comes included with two different games, Lara Croft, the Guardian of Light, and then also Lara Croft and the Temple of Osiris. Now, these are the top-down twin-stick shooters. I know some were probably hoping to get the Tomb Raider reboot trilogy being those big AAA releases, but I can say right now, I have actually played both of these games. It's been years and years, but I played these with my good friend, and that is noteworthy here because these are great cooperative games. I think if anything else, if you are looking for a good cooperative game on the Nintendo Switch, I definitely recommend both these games. Don't simply overlook them just because they're not those AAA blockbusters. Now, you can also put them on your wish list if you want. There's a good chance that they'll go on sale at some point. But otherwise, again, June 29th is their official release date where you can get the collection for $25. Oh, and okay, so here's a rather amusing story. Spider-Man 2's ESRB rating just popped up online, and okay, whatever, that's not really that big of a deal on its own. They've already announced its release day, so who cares, right? But what's happening here is that some fans noticed that the rating mentioned in-game purchases. So now some people are kind of curious if that means microtransactions will be included with Spider-Man 2 when it releases later this year. And well, okay, so let me just go and stop you right there. No, that's absolutely not what this means at all. We literally just talked about this about a month or so back with Starfield. Some people kind of jumped the gun on that ESRB listing as well for a very similar reason, or actually the exact same reason. I know at least one big YouTuber, I'm not going to name any names, but I know at least one big YouTuber that made a clickbait video around that specific topic. Probably jumped on a little too early, interestingly enough, not with Spider-Man 2 though, but you know, that's for a different topic. Basically, the only thing that you need to understand here though is that any game that has a digital deluxe edition or any type of DLC at all will have that in-game purchases warning on their rating. As an example, this warning also applies to games like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart and Horizon Forbidden West, neither of which are known for microtransactions. So if you've seen this listing being floated around with any kind of concern attached to it, well, you can just kind of simply ignore it because it doesn't confirm microtransactions or really anything like that. Speaking of PlayStation, though, Final Fantasy 16 is set to release next week on June 22nd, and let me tell you, I am absolutely pumped for this game. As I'm sure a lot of you all are already aware, I am a big Final Fantasy fan, and I think that this game looks excellent. I love the more mature tone that they're going with in this game. I like the idea of the Final Fantasy XIV team being involved here just because of the job that they did with the expansions on that game. So now I want to see what they're capable of with a fully single-player game like this. Now, I haven't played the demo myself. As I said before, I rarely play demos unless I'm on the fence for a game. I'm definitely not in this case, but I just keep hearing how amazing the demo is. Yes, there are some performance issues, though I'm not really overly concerned with that, nor am I even convinced that it is the final build. We'll see about all that, but regardless, the wait for Final Fantasy XVI has already been hard enough, but it's about ready to get even more difficult, and that's because it leaked out early. So what's happening here is that it appears that a few physical copies have been circulating in the wild. There was actually a picture posted up on Reddit about this and what appears to be several copies in some kind of warehouse, probably at a retailer, which means that they're likely getting their supply drops now, but that also means that there will be potential copies that could, somehow mysteriously find themselves in the hands of eager early players. One way or the other, they just somehow magically find their way in some people's hands just a little bit early. Well, seemingly that's exactly what's happening here because now images and details are emerging online. In other words, and this is why I'm telling you all, spoilers are here. And considering we're still 6 days away before the official release, chances are that this is only going to get worse. I mean, especially considering Final Fantasy XVI is a very rare modern game that comes with everything included on the disc with no day one patches needed. So for these people that's getting the game early, there's really not any repercussions for them to play ahead of time. They'll get the exact same experience that we'll get on June 22nd. And you know how people can be. The disrespect. Some people relish in ruining other people's experiences, and they'll spoil key moments of the story. And then once one person spoils it online, then the word of mouth really starts to spread. And that's why I'm bringing this up here. If you're looking forward to Final Fantasy XVI, and if you want to avoid those spoilers, now would probably be the time to just go ahead and ignore any type of Final Fantasy topic online. If you see something Final Fantasy related on social media, just kind of scrolling by. In fact, you can mute specific words on places like Twitter if you choose to. It might be a good idea to temporarily do that for extra precaution if you really want to. But I guess one good thing here is that this is only the physical release. And the reason I say that is because at least it's not being dumped out online where, thousands upon thousands of people are playing it. Right now, it seems kind of secluded, but yeah, we'll see how all this plays out. But I would say just kind of proceed with caution. Until then, man, I can't wait to play this game myself. One more week. Now, there's actually something else happening here for PlayStation, though. A couple of days ago, we talked about cloud streaming coming over to PlayStation Plus Premium, and in that regard, they're doing something quite similar to how Microsoft sells Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. Now, the whole CMA situation, that's ludicrous, but, they do have a similar strategy when it comes to their cloud gaming experience. However, the big differentiator between the two remains those day one first-party games. Now, Game Pass prioritizes a number of day one games, as several do come out on a monthly basis, mostly from third-party, but as a 100% guarantee to fans, their first-party games, including big AAA releases, will come to Xbox Game Pass day one. I'm just kind of doing some quick math here. If you typically play their first-party releases on a yearly basis, you'll automatically save money by being a subscriber. This year's an example, they've released Hi-Fi Rush, Ghostwire Tokyo, Redfall, and then Starfield and Forza 8 are still to come. All 5 of those games combined cost $300 as new releases. So if you got the base tier for Xbox Game Pass, you automatically save $180 by being a subscriber. Or if you have Ultimate, you save $120. So suffice to say, it's quite enticing if you like Xbox's first-party lineup even just a little bit. But what about PlayStation? That's their bread and butter, first-party exclusives. So can you imagine if they included their PlayStation first-party games into PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium day one? Suddenly their quote-unquote Game Pass competitor would shoot way up in subscription numbers. But, and here's the thing, Sony doesn't actually like this idea at all. They were asked about this in an interview with GameIndustry.biz, and check out their response here. So they said, "We're happy with our strategy. Putting games in a bit later in the life cycle has meant that we can reach more customers 12, 18 to 24 months after they have released. We're seeing customers still get excited about those games and jumping in. For us, that's working. Occasionally, there will be an opportunity to invest in a day-and-date game like Stray, and we will jump on those when they come in. But for us, letting those first-party games go out to the platform outside the service first, that's working, and that will continue to be our strategy moving forward." So, I mean, there it is once again. Now, they have kind of alluded to this strategy before, but they did kind of add a little bit more transparency here by actually talking about a very specific timeline on those staggered releases, anywhere between 12 to 24 months, which I think for them, when it comes to their AAA games, he's right. Now, this is really just my own point of view on the situation, so if you disagree, that's perfectly fine. I'm all for that. You can let me know in the comments below. But for me, Xbox and Sony, they kind of prove that different strategies can work. Game Pass works for Xbox, and that's fantastic. I love Game Pass myself. You all know this. But for a company like Sony, they're widely held for their AAA first-party games. They've built up a reputation among fans, and they have a lot of success with their $70 titles. I mean, I guarantee Spider-Man 2 will release later this year, and it will sell 10 plus million copies. So they're going to make a lot of money with that game. And that seems to be the case with most of their big blockbuster titles. They do sell very, very well. So those staggered releases do make sense for Sony. Sure, they might not necessarily get as many subscriptions as Game Pass, but they're still making a lot of money on their new games, and that's the bottom line here. You can make money by using different business models, and I think that Xbox and Sony really just kind of shows that. Now, with that said, I think something Sony could look at is a more selective first-party catalog. Now, what I mean by that is that Sony hasn't had near the success with some of their recent smaller-scale games. Gravity Rush 2, Dreams, and Concrete Genie as example. Two of the studios that worked on those games have been shut down, and Dreams did not reach its 10-year goal. So all three of those games, they went a little under the radar despite being received well among fans. So I think when it comes to those type of games, those smaller, maybe even AA games, that's where PlayStation Plus could really be beneficial. Something that Xbox Game Pass does very well is that it affords developers to be a little bit more risky and allows them to be more creative. I think that there's a very real argument that games like Pentiment, Grounded, and Hi-Fi Rush wouldn't have had near the success without something like Game Pass. In Pentiment's case, it might not even existed at all. So all of these games immediately were beneficial for Xbox because it helps them push Game Pass subscriptions. They don't need every studio to work on a specific AAA game. They can go big, they can go small, or even weird if they so choose. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that maybe certain Sony games could be used specifically to drive their service as well. Maybe not necessarily their big AAA games. I understand that. But what about a Gravity Rush 3. A lot of fans would love to have that game, and maybe putting it into something like PlayStation Plus, not only would fans like that and it would drive subscriptions, but it could also give this series the recognition that it truly deserves. What about something like, let's say, Sly Cooper? We haven't seen that in a while, a new Little Big Planet, a new Jack, or whatever. Could there be room for games like that to launch directly into PlayStation Plus? If not day one, maybe just sooner rather than later. I mean, I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing here. But what we do know for a fact is that right now, they're not putting first-party day one releases into PlayStation Plus, and that is very much clear. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though. We're asked you all, do you think Xbox will do a mid-generation refresh for the Xbox Series eventually? And okay, yeah, so talk about split results here. 31% of you all said yes, absolutely. 34% of you then said yes, but only if Sony does a PlayStation 5 Pro first. And then 31% of you said no. So, I mean, tallying up the results here, the majority does believe it will happen, though there's a difference in opinion if that's absolutely or if it's dependent on PlayStation. And I get that. Phil Spencer's recent comment didn't exactly exude confidence that a Pro model is in their soonest plans. But I think for me, I believe it will happen. I'm just predicting that it won't happen before a PlayStation 5 Pro. I think that we could see a similar situation to what we saw last generation, where the PlayStation 4 Pro launched in 2016, and then the Xbox One X that launched a year later in 2017. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if something similar happens this generation as well. Now, based on what I've seen, however, there's definitely a market for these devices. That is very much clear, and that's why I do think, at the very least, it will happen. To me, it kind of feels more like a matter of when rather than if. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.